Welcome to Giving Your AppleScripts a Facelift with AppleScriptObjC. My name is Ben Waldie. Are you guys writing AppleScripts now at all? A little bit? Okay. Alright, so, first of all, here's a download link. I have some sample materials like scripts and Xcode projects and things you guys can download, as well as my slides. It's going to be linked to on the YouTube video as well, but if you want the link earlier, you can get to it here. I'll show this again at the end too. Alright, so today I'm going to talk to you about how to make your AppleScripts more user-friendly, because anybody who's creating AppleScripts knows how user-friendly they can be. So with that, does this look familiar? This is your script running down here in the dock, and as you can see, it's a lot of feedback that it's running, so your users really know what's happening, or you know what's happening as it's running. If they're really lucky, they might get a progress indicator like the spinning beach ball, or maybe even the watch cursor, the fabled watch cursor. So this isn't very user-friendly to people, and they don't really have any indication that your script's actually doing anything. And this might not always be a problem. So if you're writing a simple, quick script that's just going to do something and then stop, then you don't really need a user interface. But if you're going to create a script that's going to take a while to run, and it's going to be time-consuming, your users or you don't know what's happening while it's running. So the script's just running and sitting there in the dock. It's like, is it frozen? What's going on? Or if you're writing a really complex script, you might have settings and things and options that you want to change, and it might not be efficient to go in and edit the script every time you want to make those changes. So generally, a script without any kind of user interface has no way for anybody to change its behavior. So what can you do about this? Who cares? Well, there's a couple things. One, you can add some simple user interface elements to your scripts. Things like alerts and dialogues and choose folder dialogues and stuff like that. And that's fairly easy to do. But you can also develop really complex user interfaces for your scripts that look and feel just like any other Mac application. And I've started to develop, for my clients, pretty much almost all my apps have at least some kind of minimal interface, not just the basic dialogues, because it really makes things a lot easier for end users. So for simple UI elements, the way that you do this is using something called, so AppleScript has a base core language that it understands, and dialogues and alerts and things are not part of that. But you can extend AppleScript by installing scripting editions. And OS X comes with a scripting edition. It's basically like a plugin for AppleScript that adds additional functionality. So Apple gives you something called standard editions, which is in the system library scripting editions folder. And you can access the dictionary for standard editions by going in AppleScript Editor and selecting Window Library and then double-clicking on standard editions. And when you do that, you'll get the standard editions AppleScript dictionary. And one of the suites up here is User Interaction Suite. And there you'll find commands for doing things like beeping, speaking text, choosing applications, choosing files, choosing folders, displaying alerts and dialogues and things like that. So you can do some pretty, basic user interaction stuff with that. And it's pretty helpful. Rather than hard coding your script to a folder or something like that, you might ask the user to choose the folder each time you display, or each time they run the script. Or, when your script's done, maybe it displays an alert to let the user know it's done. Or throughout processing, maybe it displays occasional alerts to let a user know it's processing. Here's an example of the display alert command. Basically, you just give it some text, and then you specify a button or two. And then it has some other options and things you can specify too. Here's an example of what it would look like when it runs. As you can see, pretty basic. Also, I didn't give the user an option to not erase their entire hard drive. So you can do some fun things like that. But what about a more complex request? So suppose somebody comes to you and they're like, okay, I want a script that's going to ask me to choose an image in an output folder, and then I want to be able to flip the image horizontally and or vertically, so I'm not sure which, might vary each time. I want to be able to rotate it a certain amount, scale the image a certain amount, and then save it in a different format. So for something like this, you could use simple dialogues and alerts. So for example, choose a folder, or choose a photo. Choose a folder, an output folder. Do you want to flip the image horizontally? Yes or no? Do you want to flip it vertically? Yes or no? Rotate. How much rotation do you want to apply? Do you want to scale the photo? Do you want to scale by pixels or percent? How much do you want to scale it? What output format do you want? And done, right? So that's great. But, I mean, a couple problems. One, it's a lot of dialogues for the user to get through. Second, what if the user makes a mistake on one of those dialogues? They got to start all over again. So, for a better user experience, you might want to think about looking at something like AppleScriptObjC, which is a feature set of Xcode. Now, you do need to know a little bit about Objective-C to use AppleScriptObjC. It's not pure AppleScript. It's talking with Objective-C and kind of intermixing the two. So there is a bit of a learning curve to it. So if you start, reading some tutorials or you're already familiar with Objective-C, that's going to help you a lot. You can also find some examples. There's some articles and documentation. I recently wrote a couple articles for Mac Tech and Peach Pit on AppleScript Objective-C. So you can find some documentation online, and there's forums and things where you can go get help as well. But it's a lot more complicated to pick up AppleScript Objective-C than AppleScript. But it also allows you to do cool stuff like create user interfaces that feel like any other OS X application. So the example, the image resizing example, here's an example of something that you might create with that. And as you can see, you have one interface. The user can set all their different options. Maybe you set it to remember the options that they chose, so the next time they launch the app, they don't have to enter the options again. And the source code for this example, I don't know if we'll get, depending how much time we have, if I'll get to actually walk through creating that or showing it to you. But the source code for this actual app is in the download that you guys have a link to. All right, so let me start by showing you a few real-world examples of scripts with interfaces. Let's see here. So I've written a lot of different apps for a lot of different clients. I've released some apps in the Mac App Store, and I'm not trying to do a sales pitch, but I just want to show you some of the things you can do with interfaces. So one of the apps I wrote is something called Blurb Tally, which it's just a simple, stupid little app. It was kind of my experimental app to see, okay, I want to see if I can get an AppleScript Objective-C app in the Mac App Store. And it was something I created for myself because I kept having to type in session descriptions or bios or whatever, right, into different fields online. And I always needed to figure out how many characters they were, how many words they were, because they might have a limit. So I can just type into this field, different things, and it tells me the number of characters, the number of words, the number of paragraphs, and I have some different options. So that's one example of a script that I wrote. It's all AppleScript on the back end, and it's just, basic user interface. Another example is if you want to create automator actions. So I've written tons of automator actions, and I wanted to, again, release them as a package. So I wrote an app that basically it's an AppleScript Objective-C app, and inside the app are a whole bunch of automator actions that I wrote. Now, if you want to develop automator actions for yourself or your users or whoever, you're going to write those probably in AppleScript Objective-C as well. So this app basically, it contains the automator actions, but I built an interface for it as well that displays a list of all the actions. And then it has some options to launch automator. So this action pack has actions for manipulating text. And if I go to automator, you can see here's some of the actions that are included in that pack. So find and replace in text, write to file. And these are all interfaces that you're building again in Xcode with AppleScript Objective-C kind of as the back end. And this is kind of a silly example. But if I run this, it asks me, this is an Apple automator action. What do you want to write to a file? Something cool. And then it just finds the word cool and replaces it with awesome and writes it to an awesome file on the desktop. So it doesn't really do anything super useful, but just to show you, here's something you can do with AppleScript Objective-C as well. All right. So those are a couple examples. Now let me show you a couple examples of things that I've created for my clients. I have a lot of clients that want to run scripts kind of unattended on a server. And those scripts might need to run at scheduled times, or they might need to watch folders for files for processing. So I developed this app that's a server engine. And basically when you launch it, you get this window. And then you have some configuration options. So this is designed to run on a dedicated machine. No user has to be sitting there. And so because of that, there's various options. I have created preference window, and this is all AppleScript behind the scenes, but they can choose to launch it at login. They can choose to pause it on launch or automatically start processing, and there's various options for that. They can limit how much it processes, choose an errors folder. They can even turn on email notifications so that if errors occur and things like that, it will send me an email, or send them an email, send the administrator an email. And they can even set it up to launch, or automatically connect to servers and things like that. So I built all this into the app, and you can see how much more user-friendly this makes. You know, imagine a user having to configure all this stuff. How would they do it? Like with text files or something? Or with the little dialogues? And they don't know, they don't know AppleScript. I mean, most people don't know AppleScript. They just want to run the app and have it run. So I can also specify various tasks that this app does. So I can add a task, and here I have one for building a cookbook, which is something that I did for a client. So here I choose the task that I want to run, and then there's various options. I can have the script watch a folder, or I can run it on a schedule. I can have an output folder, an errors folder. So there's all different options for that as well. So I'm just going to run this. Basically, the way that this script works is the user or the client has a FileMaker database where they enter cookbook information for like churches and things like that. So they can build all kinds of cookbooks. They gather all their data. They get it all in FileMaker. They choose a template. There's some script options down here as to like what they want to include in the cookbook. They can have they can allow recipes to split across pages. They can include filler information between, like if there's not enough space, or if there's extra space on a page, they might want filler information to pop in there. And some other options as well, like whether things are sorted, whether they want an index built, a table of contents built, and so forth. And so I'm going to just, so this script actually, instead of watching a folder, it watches a database, right? So it watches a FileMaker database, and it basically looks for any record that has a status set to ready. So the client on their machine, they can just set the status to ready whenever they want, and then this app just runs on their server, and as soon as it sees something that's ready, it goes into action. So it's going in, finding all the recipe data, extracting it, and then it's actually, going in InDesign, it's actually building here in the background a cookbook. And you can see it kind of doing its magic. And it actually runs a little faster if I hide InDesign because there's less stuff to display on the UI. So I'll just let this run. So it builds a cookbook, then it extracts all the page numbers, and then it imports them all into a FileMaker database so it can kind of massage them a little bit. And then it builds a couple of indexes. It builds an index of recipes, an index of contributors, and then it builds a table of contents. And so then if I go here to the output folder, now they have a whole book that has been built for them. And the script's got a lot of logic built into it, so it does things like, check to see if the recipe is going to break at the end of the page, and if it's going to break and they don't have recipe splitting enabled, then it moves it to the next page. And you can see it puts some filler text in and things like that, and it always starts new sections on a right-hand page and all that kind of stuff. And then it built, the indexes at the end. So that's another example of something you can do. It's obviously a lot more complex, but the interface really makes or breaks that app. Let me show you another example of a client project. So one of my clients is a big, well-known paint company, and they have to make swatches, like the things that, you go download, or you go to Lowe's and you pick up, paint swatch sheet. So I don't know exactly where they're building these, but I'm assuming they're building these things in a database or something like that. So they get this list of swatches, right? And these may come in CMYK values or RGB values or lab values. So they start with an Excel workbook, and then they want to build basically an InDesign file of these swatches. So I wrote for them the swatch assistant, and it just has a few different options here, and then it has like a little help area where they can see some information. I think if they hit this, it opens up a PDF with some additional documentation. So they can choose their different options. So I'll just run all of them, but basically, if I click process, you can see the first thing it does is it extracts all the information from Excel. And here I've got a progress, in all these things, you notice I have progress bars, so you can actually see what's happening. So it creates swatches in InDesign, then it creates swatch frames in InDesign with like little labels under them. And I'll show you this once it's done. And then it saves out all the swatches as an Adobe .ase file, which is Adobe Swatch Exchange file, so that they could be maybe imported into something else. And then it generates another Excel workbook of CMYK values. I'm not sure what the actual reason for that was. I can't remember. But it creates another Excel workbook. So let me just open up that InDesign file. Oh, it's actually open. So that's basically what the script built. I'm working on a new update for them. They want to be able to change how far apart each of these swatches is, right? And I allow them to do that now. I have like a settings file that they can modify, but they don't want to have to go in the settings file all the time. They want to be able to change all that stuff kind of on the fly. So I'm going to create some additional features in this app that allow them to create maybe presets of different options for moving these things closer together or further apart. It's really cool, actually. I think there's really cool usage of AppleScript. Let's see. And you can see here's the Excel workbook. It created the Adobe Swatch Exchange file. And actually, if I go back into this file, you can see here's all the swatches that it built. So those are a handful of examples of things that that you can do with AppleScript Objective-C, or just with with interfaces basically. And you can see how much different having an interface affects a script. I actually a long time ago went to some kind of Microsoft presentation, and they were talking about, I forget what it was on exactly, but they were talking about building progress bars, and they were not concerned at all about making them accurate. Like they were like, well, you don't really have to make it accurate. Just you just want to show the user some kind of feedback, but you can make them accurate, and that's important to do so that users know. Now, of course, if you don't know how much data there is to process, then you might display like an indeterminate progress bar that just at least moves, but doesn't show them actual progress. So anyway, those are some examples of some of the things you can do with AppleScript Objective-C. So I want to walk through creating a basic AppleScript Objective-C app so you can kind of see the process. So we're just going to create a very simple, and you guys can follow along if you have Xcode on your machine. If not, you can download it. It's free in the Mac App Store. It's a huge download, so obviously with the Wi-Fi here, you're not going to download it if you don't already have it. But I'll show you, I'll walk through the process of creating a basic AppleScript Objective-C app. We can look at some source code for that photo app if we have time. And then you guys can download these Xcode projects as well. They're all included in the download. All right, so if you go into Xcode and you choose File, New, and then you create a project, you will see that there's actually an option under OS 10 application for a Cocoa-AppleScript application. So when you hear the words Cocoa-AppleScript or AppleScript Objective-C, they're basically the same thing. You can also, let's see, if I go under Application Plugin, there's also an option for an automator action, and you can create an AppleScript Objective-C or Cocoa-AppleScript automator action as well. So that is also possible. So I'm going to just create a basic AppleScript, Cocoa-AppleScript application, and I'm going to give it a name. We'll call it Hello World. You can specify your organization name. You want to give your app some kind of ID number. This should be a unique ID for you, because you don't want it to conflict with anything else. So you probably want it to be like your name or your company name or something like that. And then you can, if you were going to create an AppleScript Objective-C app that goes in the App Store, you could choose an App Store category. You don't have to do that. You could also create a document-based application, which I've never really done that, but you can do that as well if you wanted to create maybe like a text editor or something. All right, so I'm just going to create this on the desktop. We'll call it, in a new folder, we'll call it Hello World. And Xcode, like Objective-C, Xcode has a pretty steep learning curve. So if you're not familiar with it, you're going to need time to get kind of up to speed on it. And I'm going to say that a huge portion of it you probably won't use if you're doing AppleScript stuff. So a lot of things in here you are completely irrelevant. You won't even use them. All right. So in the Xcode project, you have a couple things that you need to care about, and there's a variety of files and things in here. You're probably going to ignore most of those. But here you have main menu, which main menu.xib, this is an interface file. And here you already have a window to get you started. But this is where you're going to build your interface. And if you've never worked in the interface editor in Xcode, it's very, very easy to build a simple interface, even an advanced interface. It's all drag and drop, really easy to do. So we'll do that in a second. Then you have what's called an AppDelegate.AppleScript. This is where your main code runs, and basically the app is already set up so that it already has the code to get in here and launch this file and start running it when the app launches. This is basically you have a couple different handlers in here. Application will finish launching. So when your app launches, once it's finished launching or it's just about to finish launching, it will then execute any code in here. So you could have maybe setup code that you run, and then they give you a handler for when your app's going to terminate. So your app's going to quit. You might have cleanup code or something that you want to run there. We're not going to do that for this particular project. All right. So in the main menu.xib, I want to add just a text field and a button. So let me see here. I just want to pull up my examples and make sure I don't leave anything out. All right. So across the top, there's a little utilities button I can click to show the utilities area. And along the bottom here, I have some different options. The third one in is to show the object library. So this is a list of basically all the different window or objects that you can add to a window in Xcode, along with some other stuff too. And the easiest way to find things is just type in what you want to find. So let's say I want to add a label first. So I'll just search for label, and then I can just drag it to my interface, and you can see Xcode gives me kind of guides to help me line things up the proper way. So because Apple, they have very kind of strict guidelines that they want you to follow when you design an app. They really want apps to look and feel the same throughout the operating system to the extent possible. So they've actually published on the Apple Developer Connection website a human interface guidelines document, which if you want to know, exactly how many pixels from the left your, buttons and things should be, you can go read about that kind of stuff. Xcode also has an auto layout feature now, which you can use, and you can, if you have it turned on, you can set things to automatically kind of lay themselves out in a certain way. So if the user maybe resizes the window, things automatically adjust based on that. You can set some options like that yourself as well. All right, so I'm going to prompt the user to enter their name. So I'm just going to change the text here, and we'll call it enter your name. And then the next thing I want is a text field, so I'm just going to search for text. And there's a text field element, and I'll drag that up. And you can extend it if you want to. And again, you can line these things up. It kind of helps you align them. And then the next thing I want to do is I want to put a button. So I'm going to search for button. And I'm just going to drag, let's see here, well, push button, I guess, up here. And I'll just put it after the text field, and we'll call this go. All right, so that's my basic interface. And I can shrink this down to fit a little bit and change the size. There's all different options. You can set the window to, allow a user to resize it or not resize it. So for each of these elements, there's all kinds of options that you can specify. You can have buttons that have pictures as background. You can change the size of the text field, the font, the background color, whether or not you want it bordered. You can have things enabled, disabled, all kinds of stuff. All right, so that's my basic interface. Now the next thing I want to do is start writing my code that's going to do something when somebody types something in here and clicks go. So I'm going to jump back to my AppDelegate.AppleScript, and I'm going to create a property at the top of my script. So I'm going to type property, the name, colon, and then an empty string. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to create what's called a binding. And a binding is something that connects my interface to my code. So when the value in the interface changes, the code picks that up. So if I jump back to my main menu.xib and I click on the text field, if I go through this list of tabs here up at the top on the right-hand side, there's an option for the bindings inspector. And here you have all these different attributes of the text field. And these are all things that I can bind to my code if I want to. So I'm going to bind the value of this text field. And I'm just going to call it the name. So I'm naming it the same as what I just typed in my AppleScript code. And that is telling Xcode that this text field's value is going to be bound to the name property in my AppleScript code. There's also another option that I want to select here, and that is continuously updates value. So that means that basically, as the user, whenever the user is typing, it's going to keep updating its value. It's not going to it's not going to wait to update until the user clicks out of the field, because otherwise they might click go and they haven't clicked out of the field yet or something like that, and the code hasn't been updated to reflect the current value. So pretty much anytime I create a text field, I'm always selecting continuously updates value. So next I want to do something when they click the go button, right? So now my code, it knows what the user types there, but it doesn't do anything. So I'm going to create another handler here, and I'm going to call this on display name, and then I'm going to do an underscore, and in parentheses, sender. And then I'm going to end display name. So if you're going to connect an interface element to a handler in your AppleScript code, your handlers are always going to be formatted with the name of the handler, underscore, and then in parentheses some variable name that represents whatever was clicked or whatever the action occurred on. So you can see here, this is how they've already kind of done this for these existing handlers. So application should terminate, and then the sender is whatever is sending that command. The application should terminate command, which is probably the app itself. Same here. Application will finish launching. It's receiving, or it's being called by a notification of some kind. So if I wanted to interact with this notification for some reason, or if I wanted to interact with whatever's telling the app to terminate, I could do that this is basically just a variable that I could talk to. I'm not really actually going to do anything with this variable, but it has to exist there. So now that I've formatted this handler name this way, if I go back to my main menu and let's see, so down here, you have a reference to your AppDelegate, and this is tied to the AppDelegate.AppleScript. So if I control click on this and I just drag it up to the go button, wait, maybe I have to go the other way. Right, so from the go button, to the AppDelegate, you can see this shows me all the handlers that are formatted the correct way in my AppleScript code. So display name is listed there, and I can just connect that button to the display name handler. And there's another view up here as well. Let's see. Here, what is this? Connections, I think it's called. Yeah, the connections inspector. This allows me to see what my different connections are. So if I select this button, I can see it's connected to the display name handler, and it's a sent action. So when it's clicked, it's sending an event. It's sending a call to this display name handler. If I click on this text field, you can see that this shows me the bindings that are assigned to this. So this is the value binding is assigned to, actually, there's something I forgot to set. And I can actually see that now here. Let me jump back to bindings. One thing I forgot to set. So when you bind a value of an element in Xcode, you can bind it to the user defaults, which is like the plist file, essentially. So let's say you wanted your app to remember the next time the script is launched what value the user entered here. You might bind it to the user defaults, so that way that value gets stored in the plist file automatically, and then the next time the app launches, it automatically loads from the plist file. Well, I don't want to bind this to the plist file. I want to bind it to my AppDelegate. So I actually forgot that I have to change this up here to AppDelegate. So I'm binding to my AppDelegate, and now I have to re-enter that variable or the binding name again. Does that make sense? Okay. So now I can write my code to display the user's name. So I'm just going to write, let's see, I'll say activate, which just makes sure that this app is in the front, because if you're displaying an alert or something, you probably want it to come to the front so that the user actually sees it instead of it just hopping in the dock. And then I'm going to say display alert and hello ampersand the name. And I can just refer to my binding here that I've specified. And that's it. So that's my whole app. And if I run this, hopefully it should work. Let's see. I got an error of some kind. Yeah, that's because it's getting hung up. Let's see here. Let me just unbind that and rebind it. Actually, I might have to bind it to the file's owner instead of the AppDelegate. I think I may have bound it to the wrong thing. Let me just change that to file's owner instead. I think that will take the problem away. No? Is that working for anybody else? All right. Well, let me open up my example code here then and see what I may have done differently. All right, so got that bound to yeah. Oh, yeah, you're right. So that should be AppDelegate. Is that right? Yeah. Put it in the wrong field. Sorry. Right. So value transformer is a different field. I'm not really going to get into what that's for, but I put it in the wrong field. Sorry about that. Okay, so yes, I was right. AppDelegate, and I just put the name into the wrong field. So if I run this, I get my app to launch, and if I say Ben, should say hello Ben. So there you go. There's a very simple interface. It doesn't really do anything useful, but just to show you kind of how you build an AppleScript Objective-C app. So basically, you're going to be creating bindings for or properties that translate to bindings for values and things like that in your interface, and you're going to be creating properties as well for possibly for objects that you want to interact with in your interface. And then you're going to be creating handlers or methods that you want to be triggered when various events occur. And then in your interface, you're going to be linking your code to your interface through these bindings and connections. So again, from the bindings tab, you're probably going to be spending a lot of time in here linking stuff to your AppDelegate, and there's all different options that you can link. So if you're doing like a progress bar, you might have bindings for how long the progress bar can be, like how many increments are there in the progress bar? What's the minimum? What's the maximum? What's the current value? Is it an indeterminate progress bar or an incremental progress bar? Is it visible or not visible? So there's all different options depending on the kind of thing that you're going to interact with. But you can see that basically your code now is tied directly to the interface. So as your code changes, or your interface changes, the other side updates automatically. All right, so that's just a simple example. Let's take a look at that example where a user wants to modify an image. So was anybody in the AppleScript session I did yesterday where I was talking about image events? Well, this is basically similar to that. So in OS 10, there's a background application called image events that allows you to do some basic image manipulations. So here I have a simple AppleScript that I wrote, and this is all included in the download. But basically, this script, it asks the user to choose. So this is where all those dialogues and alerts I was running through came from. But it asks the user to choose a photo that they want to manipulate, where they want to save the manipulated photo, and then it gives them all these different options, right? And then it launches this background application called image events, and it opens the image, and this happens like there's no interface, so the user doesn't see anything that's going on. And then it tells the image to get its name, and then to flip it based on the options that the user chose, to rotate it a certain amount, and then to scale the image a certain amount, and then to save it into the folder that they chose using the extension that they chose, and then to close the image, and then finally display an alert. So I'll just run this just so you can kind of see it run real quick. Let's see. So I have a sample file here somewhere. So here's an example image, and I'll just say I want to save it to the desktop. And it gives me all these options. Do I have to flip it horizontally? Yes. Vertically? Yes. Rotate? Yes. How much do you want to rotate? 90 degrees. Do you want to scale it? Yes. I'll scale it by pixels. I'll scale it to 100 pixels. And then maybe I want to save it in TIFF format. And it's done, and there's my processed file. So that's great, but now we want to add this interface to it. So we can do that by creating an Objective-C app. And let's see here. So here's the basic AppleScript code for doing this. Okay, this is the code that I just ran essentially. And instead of prompting the user to enter all these values, I've specified some default values for all these things. Okay, because these are going to be the basis for my photo manipulator. So actually, I will just create an Xcode project. I'll kind of create this. Whoops. So if you're going to use keyboard shortcuts to create a project, you want to do, instead of Command-N, you want to do Command-Shift-N to create a project. Command-N just creates a file in your project. So I'm going to create an AppleScript Objective-C project. We'll call it Photo Manipulator, and we'll just save it to the desktop. All right, so I've got another empty project, and I'm just doing this so you guys don't have to see me sitting here writing all this code. I'll just copy and paste some of it. But the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to copy out all these properties and paste them into my script up here. So here I have the photo path, the output path, all these different options for flipping things horizontally and vertically, how much rotation. So these are like default values, right? Default values for what the user is going to specify. And then I have an image view because I want to display a preview of the image that they choose on the interface. And does anybody have any questions so far about anything I've done so far? Okay. All right. So next I'm going to jump back into my script here, and I have some handlers that I've written for doing things like browsing for a photo, browsing for an output folder, and then processing a photo. So I'm just going to copy these out into my script as well. All right, so browse for a photo is asking the user to choose a file with prompt, please select an image. And then if I really wanted to be safe, I probably would add some code here to make sure they actually choose an image, because they might choose some other kind of file. And then I'm going to run an Objective-C command called init with contents of file. So this is where kind of learning Objective-C and figuring out some of this stuff comes in handy. So I'm going to init with contents of file of the NSImage class in Objective-C. And that's basically loading the image. It's reading the image file and loading it. And then I'm going to set a path to that path. I'm going to set a photo path, which is another, let's see. set photo path. I guess that's some kind of set photo path. Oh, right. Photo path is up here, right? So this is a property. So if I'm going to set the value of this, in AppleScript, you would normally write something like set photo path to XYZ, right? But this is a binding in AppleScriptObjC. And when you are setting the value of a binding, you can't just set it, right? Instead, what you have to do is you have to call a handler that doesn't actually exist called set in lowercase, and then the name of the binding that you want to set. So AppleScript Objective-C kind of knows what to do when you do this. So again, there's quite a learning curve with this stuff. Yeah, it's basically creating a setter for this property value or this binding. But this is getting created on the fly. You don't actually have to write this handler. So set photo path is basically anytime you're going to set the value of a property, you're going to say set and then the property name with an uppercase for the first character, and then underscore and the value that you're going to set it to, right? So I'm setting it to the path that the user chose as string, and then I'm doing the same thing for image, which let's see. So here, image view, this is a little bit different. This is not actually a binding. This is a reference to the image view class. So I'm going to create an image view in my interface, and instead of binding an attribute of the image view, I'm actually going to bind the image view itself to my code. And so an image view in Objective-C has a set image method that you can call. And so I'm basically going to set image of the image view, and I'm going to give it the loaded image that I loaded 2 lines above. Does that make sense? Now looking at the set output browse for output folder, I'm going to ask the user to choose an output folder, and I'm going to store that in this variable, and then I'm going to set the binding of that property as well. So here I have output folder path, and you can see I have the set before it again. So I'm setting its value to the chosen path as string. Now my process photo routine, my process photo handler is a little bit similar. So first thing it does is it gets all of the property values that I've specified up above. So it gets the photo path, the output folder path, all the flipping options and things like that. And then it sets and then it kind of just goes through and it runs all my standard AppleScript code that I had already written to do the scaling and things like that. And then it displays an alert at the end. So I don't want to walk through creating the whole entire interface for you unless you really want me to. But here's the interface, okay? And all of these things would be then bound. I don't have any bindings here, but I would basically start binding these things to my interface. So I'm writing my AppleScript code, I'm building my interface, and then I'm starting to connect the two. So if I go back into my AppleScript, okay, I have a photo path, right? So I'm going to start binding that to my interface. And if I come back here, here's my photo path. I'm going to bind its value to my files, or let's see, to my AppDelegate. And I'm going to continuously update its value. I'm going to bind the output folder to this field. So you're going to kind of go through and do this for all of the different interface elements that you are going to interact with. And one of the benefits of bindings is that you don't have to write any code. Aside from just creating the binding, you don't have to write any code to get that value and set that value really as you would if you were going to try to interact with it directly. Like otherwise, what I would have to do is I would have to tell this text file to set, or this text field to set its value, or to do something. Instead, I can just set the value directly. So that's one of the benefits of bindings. So for image view, that's one thing I didn't go over yet, and that's how do I link this to my code? Because I need to update, as I mentioned down here, the image view has a set image method that I want to call. So in order to do that, I need to bind the actual image view to my code, or to my interface. The actual image view in my interface to my AppleScript code. So in AppleScript Objective-C, when you're still going to create a property value, but when you give it a value of missing value, that tells AppleScript Objective-C and Xcode that is going to be bound to some kind of element in your interface. So if I go back to my interface, and here's where I think if I have to drag this way. So for my photo manipulator AppDelegate, if I drag from that to this image view, you can see it shows me a list of any properties that I have in that AppDelegate AppleScript code with a missing value. So if I were to go back here and add property XYZ, missing value, and then come back here and drag this again, you can see now XYZ shows up there. But it doesn't show any of the other properties because it doesn't perceive those as outlets. So I would just connect that to here, right? So now my code is bound to that object, to that class, and I can interact with it just by referencing this. So I can get any attributes that it has, I can initiate any methods that it supports, and things like that. All right, so that's the next step, is to then start binding all these things to the interface. So let me just open up phase 3, step 3 here, which is I've already bound everything, so you don't have to sit here and watch me do every single one. But if I go to my interface, you can see now I've started to, if I look at my connections inspector, you can see, okay, the image view is bound to that. The button is bound to the browse for photo method or handler. The output folder browse button is connected to the browse for output folder handler. The process button is connected to process photo. And then I have various other options as well. So the selected value of this dropdown is bound to the output type property. And I've also done some additional kind of trickery here, where I've bound the rotate button. So the rotate button, right, that's bound to a property called apply rotation. And then this text field, maybe I only want that to be enabled if that checkbox is selected. So I've actually bound that to two different bindings. I bound it to I bound it to this element's binding, right? So whatever the value of this is either going to be yes or no, true or false. Is this checkbox selected? And the enabled of this is bound to the same thing. So as the user checks and unchecks this, I don't have to write any code to do this, but this text field will automatically be enabled or disabled. So that's another area where the binding is going to save me time. I don't have to write any code to do that. I can just do it by just selecting some checkboxes in Interface Builder. But then the value of that text field is bound to the rotation amount property in my script. And I did the same thing up here as well. So scale to has a value binding, and then that value binding is connected to the enabled of these two elements, right? So if I check this, these will become enabled or disabled based on that. And then back in my AppleScript code, I've written code to check for all these things. So if rotate image is true, then check to see if the rotation amount is 0, and if it is, then turn off image rotation. Apply scaling, same deal. And then I have all these if-then things in here too, in the image events code, that basically decide, okay, if rotation is true, then rotate the image a certain amount. If scale image is true, then, based on whether they chose pixels or percent, then scale it a different way, and all that stuff. So if I run this, now a couple things that I didn't do with this app, just because I didn't take it that far, but one thing that I would do if I was going to do this for a client, I'd build a progress bar into this. Some kind of progress window to show them what's happening as the script is modifying the image. Because, still I'm not giving them feedback as the script runs. Another thing that I would do is I would set it up to remember what values they selected so that the next time they launch the app, they don't have to re-specify everything. I didn't do that in this case. It's just to show you kind of what the interface does. So I will browse to an image file. And let's see here. All right, so there's my image file. And you can see I have the path here. Another thing that I like to do with path fields, I always have path fields where people can select paths in my interfaces. Because I don't want my users to have to come back to me every time they want a script change. I want them to be able to choose their folders and things like that on the fly. So one thing I do, because a lot of times a path is not going to fill up that whole field, or it's going to be too long, right? It's going to be cut off. So you can actually set this, and actually I also didn't set this up to change the window size of these other items. But one of the things that I will do is I'll set that path field. You can actually, just with a checkbox in Interface Builder, set it to truncate the beginning or the end or the middle of the path, of whatever's in it. So I will set it to truncate the beginning, because usually they don't care the beginning part of the path, they only care about the end part. But the other thing that I will do is, since I have this, the value of this text field is bound to my code, I will put that same binding on the tooltip of the text field. So when they hover their mouse over it, they'll see a tooltip that shows them the whole path. So that's very helpful as well, because now they can see the full path to where that thing is. And then I have some different options I can choose, and you can see when I select the rotate button, that text field gets automatically enabled and disabled. Same with the scale to. And again, I didn't write any code to enable these. It's just using bindings in interface, or in the interface editor of Xcode. And then I'll choose my output folder. Again, I'll choose my desktop, and then I just click process, and my image has been manipulated. And you can see that when I browsed for a photo, that actually displayed a little. That's where that set image method of the image class, whatever this element is called, image well or something like that. So I'm loading that image into there to show them a preview of the image. And here I have my processed image. Okay, so again, the example code, all this source code is in the download. You guys can mess around with it if you want to, if you really want to get into AppleScript Objective-C. But I just mainly want to just show you what was possible and the basics of kind of how you would build that. I also have a currency converter that I wrote for one of my articles on AppleScript Objective-C, which is very similar. So here I just have a couple text fields. They can enter an exchange rate, dollars to convert, and then an amount in other currency. That's going to actually get set by the script, and then a convert button. And again, you can see these things are just wired up to different things. These ones actually have what's called a formatter applied. So in Xcode, when you add a text field to an interface, you can have a formatter applied to it. Like if it's going to be a number or it's going to be a price, maybe, you can set a formatter on it, and then that will prevent the user from entering an invalid value. So like they have to enter a number, and you could even specify some options for like how that number's formatted and things like that. And then I'll save you from having to write code to figure out all that and check it against what the user entered. And then in my AppDelegate, again, you can see I have some properties. So I have you can see these are bound to values of the first two fields. And then the third field, I actually have the whole field bound or connected to my, so you can see there's an outlet to my code here, so the amount field. And then when I click the run or the go button or whatever, it does perform conversion, and it just sets a value of sets the value of this field that's connected to the exchange rate times the dollars. And that's it. So if I run this and I click convert, it just runs. So again, very, very simple example. I wrote this because so the predecessor to AppleScript Objective-C was something called AppleScript Studio. I don't know if anybody's ever used that, but it's just a feature set of Xcode that Apple gave you for building interfaces like this. The difference is that, well, it used mainly AppleScript language, so you didn't really have to do any Objective-C kind of stuff. And then with Snow Leopard, Apple deprecated that. They deprecated AppleScript Objective or AppleScript Studio. AppleScripts, if you have any AppleScript Studio apps, I don't know if some of you may have them, they will still work in Mountain Lion. And so you can continue to run them. You cannot, well, you shouldn't edit them with the current version of Xcode because it doesn't support some of the features and it will actually like break the script. So if you try to, if you have an AppleScript Studio app and you try to open it in the new Xcode, you should be able to open it, but you will run into problems if you try to build it and run it. You can actually, if you're running an older operating system, so AppleScriptObjC only will work. If you build an AppleScriptObjC app, it will only work in 10.6 and higher, because it didn't exist prior to that. So if you have older machines on your system and for some reason you want to build interfaces for them, you can actually keep a copy of Xcode like 3 installed on your Mac. Like I have Xcode 3.2.5, I think, and the new version of Xcode, kind of both on my Mac. And you can run them both. You just have to find a copy of the old one and get it to install on your system. But you can still do that. And so I still continue to go into like old client projects and update them using Xcode 3. Because Xcode 4 will break certain things. Anyway, so one of the examples Apple had for AppleScript Studio was a currency converter. So I decided to recreate that with AppleScriptObjC to just demonstrate how it would be done. Okay. So that is kind of the basics of AppleScriptObjC, and let me jump back here, and we already took a look at a bunch of these. Let me give you some resources, and then if anybody has any questions, or you want to see anything else, let me know. So Apple's developer connection website. If you're not already a member, you can sign up for a free online membership. It's a great resource. When you're writing AppleScriptObjC, you're going to be calling Objective-C a lot, and you're going to be interacting with things like NS text fields and NS image wells or whatever they're called, and all these different Objective-C components or Cocoa elements. And so you're going to want to look at the Cocoa documentation to find the proper terminology for interacting with these things, like the method names and attribute names and things like that. So the developer connection website, has all that documentation, and it's again, there's a learning curve, but once you get over that hump, you'll start to kind of figure out where to look for this stuff. There's also a lot of third-party websites for that kind of stuff as well. MacOSXautomation.com is another great resource. I believe you can find a lot of information just in general about automation, like Automator stuff, services stuff, and AppleScript stuff. There are some example AppleScript Objective-C projects on there. There's also an AppleScript Objective-C book you can buy through there that was written by a guy in, I believe he lives in Australia, Shane Stanley, that he's a really good scripter. And so he wrote up, that's the only AppleScript Objective-C book I'm aware of at this time. So you can find a lot of good resources there. MaxScriptor.net. This is a scripting forum. Tons of information on AppleScript and Automator and whatever else. But they also have forums dedicated to AppleScript Objective-C. And when I started learning AppleScript Objective-C, I would look on there for things, or even as I write stuff now, I'm not like a Cocoa expert. I mean, I'm learning as I go. So I'm figuring it all out. But MaxScriptor.net, anytime I have a question, I go there and I just search for it and I pretty much find the answer for how to do it. So it's a great resource for anything like that you might want to, if you get stuck or something like that. And there's thousands of scripters on there, or hundreds at least. My website, I have a tips section where I have links to pretty much every article. I've written like dozens and dozens of articles for MacTech, Macworld, all different places. Almost all of them are available online for free. I have a couple AppleScript Objective-C ones I wrote recently, some for PeachPit, and then some for MacTech. The MacTech ones I don't think, unless you're a subscriber of the magazine, you can get it on the iPad, or you can order the print ones. But they don't usually post the articles for like a year for free viewing. But I've written a few things on that. And then the PeachPit ones are just online. You can go view them. So if you just go to my website and search for like AppleScript Objective-C, you'll probably find them. If you have questions, you're welcome to email me, or, bug me on Twitter. That's where you can download the samples. All the examples I showed you are up there, as well as some links to some of the websites I mentioned. Anybody have any questions or problems that they want to go over? Yeah.
You mentioned the studio aspect being deprecated. Has there been any other things that sort of changed along the way that made maybe some of these apps difficult or that you have to update, or is there any kind of rising with 10.9 where it's saying, oh yeah, it's going to go away?
I mean, I would say I kind of question what's the future of Automator. So if you're developing Automator actions, I kind of wonder, Apple hasn't done a whole lot of updating for that lately. So if you're developing Automator actions, I don't know. I mean, they still have a template in an AppleScript Objective-C template, and it seems to work pretty well. And they did have a few minor updates with Mountain Lion. So I don't know what their plan is for that. It doesn't really fit into the whole sandboxing idea. So who knows? Some changes could come down the pipe for that. For AppleScript, I mean, Apple invested a pretty considerable amount of time in AppleScript Objective-C, I think. So I think that has helped solidify AppleScript's place for a while. Like, I don't see it going away anytime soon. I mean, who knows? I could be wrong. You don't know what Apple's going to do. But I mean, they did implement that, and that gives AppleScript into hooks that it has never had before. So you can do all kinds of really cool stuff. And if you want to learn Objective-C too, I mean, it's a good way. Like, I've been teaching myself Objective-C for a while now, and learning AppleScript Objective-C was like a good step in the right direction. Like that kind of, I already knew AppleScript, and so I had to learn a little bit of Objective-C to kind of get into AppleScript Objective-C, and then I was able to get into Objective-C a little bit more because things just made sense. As far as things not working or changing, AppleScript Objective-C hasn't really changed much since they introduced it. One thing I can think of that if you do have studio stuff, well, again, I mentioned if you can open up a studio project in in the new Xcode. If you have an interface, in Studio you linked your elements differently to your AppleScript code than you do in AppleScript Objective-C, and those links will break in the new Xcode. So that's one thing that will cause major problems. So you really want to keep your stuff separate. Another thing that they did too is, so Xcode and the interface editor used to be two separate apps. It was Xcode and Interface Builder. Now they're kind of combined into the same app. So if you do have like an older version of Xcode with Interface Builder on it, there's an AppleScript palette in there. That's where you kind of link your elements to your AppleScript code. I don't remember when they did this, but they actually turned that palette off for a while. And so if you launch Interface Builder in an old Xcode and you don't see the AppleScript palette, you have to enable it through the command line. Like you have to modify a value in Interface Builder's preference file. So that's another thing that I've seen a few people run into problems with. They're like, oh, I'm trying to edit my AppleScript Studio app and I can't find the AppleScript palette. That's why it's just disabled. But those are the only things that I've seen. If you want to upgrade an AppleScript Studio app to AppleScript Objective-C, let's see. I'm trying to remember who I wrote it for. I think I just wrote an article on that for Mac Tech, and I used the currency converter example. It's not really that straightforward of a process. I mean, you really have to kind of redevelop the app. So be prepared for a little bit of time there if you have an existing app you want to upgrade. Yeah.
How's the syntax checking in Xcode? It seems like it was broken for a while.
It doesn't. I mean, yeah, it's not great. I mean, there's some things that have improved. So in Xcode, one thing that, let me see here. So one thing is that you have this drop-down of methods or handlers and properties and things like that. And that just, if you have a really long script with a lot of handlers and things like that, this allows you to kind of jump between them very easily, and it alphabetizes them and things like that. That was kind of broken for a while, and so it didn't really display things in the proper way. That seems to have been fixed. Xcode, it doesn't. So with if you were working in an older version of Xcode, you could edit your script and then you could kind of compile it here, right? And it would check for syntax errors at that time. AppleScript Objective-C doesn't work that way. It doesn't really check for syntax errors until you go to build your script. So if I took off this endtel, there's no real compile button here. But if I go to run this, I'm going to get an error, right? And so I have to then go to the errors area and kind of diagnose, I can see there's an OSA compile error. And this will tell me, here, this expected an end of line, but it found an identifier. But it does tell me the line that it occurred on. So if I go back to my code, it should be around there, 96. So the problem happened here, right? And so now I know, okay, I have to add an endtel or whatever. Actually, I think I had it up higher, but. No. Well, if I say like tell app finder, right? And then I say end, it will work, right? But it doesn't change the code, right? I won't see that change. So I actually, I will actually like write and tell and things like that when I do my AppleScript Objective-C code. Or, I might write it in AppleScript Editor and then bring it into here because it's, it's just, I want to read it the way it's supposed to be read. Another thing though that you do have is code completion, which you actually have in AppleScript Editor too, though it's a little bit hacky to get to. But if I wanted to refer to something, I can just start typing it, and then I can kind of just, do that. So that's a little bit helpful. There's no real aside from this, there's no debugging or anything. Like you can't set breakpoints and step through your code or go run it and have it stop at the breakpoints or anything like that, like you can in like real Objective-C. The debugger just doesn't really work for AppleScript. And it never has, even with AppleScript Studio. So, yep.
Like progress bars like that, where you're checking the progress.
Yeah, I mean, so one thing that you want to be careful about in an AppleScript Objective-C app is you don't want to enter a repeat loop and then start incrementing a progress bar like in the repeat loop, because when you're in a repeat loop, the UI doesn't refresh. So you kind of have to separate your progress bar code from your repeat loop code. And so one way you can do that is you can create like NS timers, which is basically like you're saying, instead of doing a repeat, you're like running a chunk of code, and at the end you're saying like delay for like a 0.1 second or something like that, and then run this piece of code again. And so you're running the same code again, but not with an actual repeat loop. You're kind of like setting a timer or something to do that. And then you might have another timer running on the side. So it's basically like creating another thread in the app. And that other timer, that other thread is maybe every second or however often, every half a second, it's watching some values or it's updating the progress bar, based on that. So it's a little bit, it's different than you might normally be used to. And it takes a little bit of time to kind of figure out the best way to do that. There's a lot of examples on MacScriptor about that kind of stuff. Or if you decide to do that and you get stuck, you can email me and I probably send you some sample code or something. So you can run, Objective-C code. You can actually integrate Objective-C code with your AppleScript Objective-C app if you want to. For example, for my Mac App Store apps, I wanted code that would validate the receipt. So when you download an app from the App Store, it generates a receipt, and that receipt you might want your app to validate, right, to make sure that it's being used on an authorized machine. And I don't even know how I would go about writing that code in AppleScript, but I ended up finding like a Cocoa library that I was able to integrate into my AppleScript Objective-C app, and then have my AppleScript code call that library, and vice versa to authenticate and check the receipt to make sure it's a valid app. Yep.
Is it difficult to dynamically size your interface with the buttons? You mentioned the one interface you hadn't built it in.
It's pretty easy. So let's see here. Let me just try to change the size here so you can see a little better. So if I wanted to make this resizable, because I don't think it's resizable right now, the first thing I would do is I would say, okay, they can resize this, and I can disable that, right? Or I can turn it on. And then here under the measurements area or whatever this is called, size inspector, you can do some things like maybe you always want this to appear in the middle. You can say, center it horizontally, center it vertically. So some things like that are kind of like built in. Then you can set like a maximum width, maximum height, things like that. If I wanted, say, this text field to automatically expand wide as the window gets bigger, it's just a matter of like checking these things, right? So you're picking what side you want to connect it to. In this case, I want to connect it to both sides, and then I'm going to have it get wider. And then maybe I want this to not get wider, but to just move to the right. So if I then, let's see, simulate this, now you can see that those fields automatically move. But I mean, you'd want to do it for everything else too. There also is an auto layout feature of Interface Builder, which, let's see here. So if I go here, so auto layout, and basically what that does is it kind of connects things. I don't use it very often because it never connects things the way I want them to. Let me see here. So see how I'm moving this down and these things are automatically moving? That's auto layout kind of connecting these elements automatically to the bottom of my window. But, you know, I might not want that to happen. So there's a lot of times when I don't want auto layout doing the weird things that it does. And so I don't usually use it very often. Another thing that you can do that's pretty cool is like let's say you want to retain whatever the user, like if the user resizes the window or moves it to a different part of the screen, maybe you want it to remember that so that the next time they launch it, it appears in the same spot. If you just set a value here, like autosave, we'll call it a window position. You can call it whatever you want. Then it will just use that, and then the next time the window, like it basically stores that in the plist file. And then the next time the app launches, it automatically positions the window into that spot. I think I'd probably have to disable the center vertically and horizontally thing here, maybe, but I'm not sure. Yep.
If you're already in Xcode, why go this hybrid route of AppleScript Editor if you want to just go ahead and write the app?
Well, you could. I mean, if AppleScript is usually used to talk to connect applications together and talk to apps. So, I mean, if you're writing an AppleScript, you're not writing like an app per se. You're writing an app that's controlling other apps. So, you know, so if you're going to write a script, or if you're going to write an app that like controls Photoshop and Illustrator and things like that, and connects the two together and does this workflow process, then you know you would probably use AppleScript for that. But you could call AppleScript from a Cocoa app too. Like if you want to just write an Objective-C app, you can call it from there. You can do that as well. Yep.
In terms of the final product, is on bundling, is it a package or is it a binary?
It's just an app. I mean, it's just a normal application.
So basically, it's a Objective-C app that's essentially calling the AppleScript code to do it.
Yeah. If I go into the package here, there's actually, so here's my script, right? And you can set it to be read only or run only so it's not editable. But yeah, the script is in here, so I guess when the app launches, it's just loading that and running it. All right. Well, thank you. If anybody has any other questions, you're welcome to message me or email me or, you know, come up afterwards and ask them. Thanks, guys.